When you think of the four main troop types in Rise of Kingdoms, I bet one that doesn't really come to your mind are the siege units, a troop that's never ever been open field usable, let alone in the meta. But I think that out of all the troop types, even more than infantry, siege have real potential to become the new meta in Rise of Kingdoms. And today, I'll be telling you why siege are actually really strong on the open field and what potential they may hold for the future and why siege may become the meta. I will also talk about what this means for us open field players and if you should consider investing in siege units. So if you're interested in siege and why I think they are really strong or why it could affect you on the open field, or even if you should invest in siege, you want to stick around till the end of the video. Now let's start off today's video by talking about advantages siege units just straight up have over every other troop type before we even include commanders. And the first real advantage that siege have over other troops is their equipment. This siege equipment is way stronger than every other troop, giving like a total of 26% more stats than other troops if you exclude the legendary weapon and you only use the epic weapon, because siege currently don't have a legendary weapon. And the reason they give so many more stats is when you look at every single piece, they have one really distinct advantage. Not only are they giving just straight up more stats, they're actually giving double stats for siege, and we only know of one other piece of equipment that can do that. That is the Vanguard Halberd, which gives 9% cavalry stats because it gives double cav stats. But in terms of legendary equipment, siege are the first of any troop type to give double stats because they give one amount of, let's say, like attacking or defensive stats, and then the siege equipment also gives you some amount of, let's say, march speed. So you can see right here, it gives you march speed on every single piece of equipment for siege, just straight up in the base stats for that equipment. And you're also an advantage in terms of the actual stats. So for example, a helmet for siege is 14.5% attack, where a helmet for archers is only 11% attack. So 3.5% more attacking stats. And then you've got the 4% march speed. So you're 7.5% more stats than other troop types, which is really powerful. And that goes for every single piece of siege equipment. And then the legs and the boots are like 5.5% more. So that is really strong how many extra stats the siege equipment is getting. And the set bonuses are even giving more stats. And these stats really do matter. We've seen in my video where I showed off the Zenith of Power, if a long encounter happens, which often would happen with siege since you've got a ranged advantage to keep picking at one person, then these stats are going to matter a lot. And especially since siege units really only take counterattack on the open field, these extra like 30% of total stats are really strong. They're going to allow you to get much better trades, and the good thing about the equipment is you don't have to go out of your way to get it. It's the same price as every other equipment. The only difference is the materials are more spread out. So siege equipment is the same price, the same difficulty to acquire. You can get these from the same events as any other piece of equipment, and they are even more powerful than other troops. So siege are already at a major advantage in terms of equipment. The other reason that siege equipment is also really good is that before recently, Lilith was discussing about adding new equipment for the infantry, cavs, and archers, and this new equipment would have pretty much been on par with the siege equipment. When we looked at it and when we read deep into it, it looked like Lilith was going to add a literal statistical upgrade to all the cav equipment, and then when we look at the cav equipment, 11% defense would have probably become 14.5% defense to be on par with siege. And in that situation, siege troops would have lost their advantage. But now that Lilith said they're going to be upgrading equipment by literally allowing you to upgrade it, then I'm going to presume siege equipment is going to fall under that category as well. So siege will become the pretty much still meta dominant equipment even after all these new equipment changes come out, because it should still have more stats than every other troop, which will make it still extremely powerful and extremely valuable. The next situation that puts siege at a good advantage is they get a lot of attention from Lilith. At the moment, Lilith is really trying to push siege equipment and siege commanders in general, and they've done a lot of things to do it. And one of the main things they've done is they've changed how the ranged formation worked, because before recently, you would have to wait 15 seconds to enter and exit tower mode, but now it's only 6 seconds to enter tower mode and 7 seconds to exit. So they've literally more than half the amount of time to enter and exit the tower mode for all siege commanders, and that was definitely one of their biggest disadvantages. To exit siege tower mode, if you were caught out in the open field, you would pretty much be annihilated, because by the time you exit the tower mode, they've gotten a full skill cycle and more into your commanders, but now you can exit your tower mode before they even get a chance to put a full skill cycle on you. So if you're paying a lot of attention to your siege, you're at a major advantage, since you can study the open field and easily get in and out of situations almost instantly because your tower mode is halved. So you can easily get out of those tough situations, which were my number one concern with Siege back in the day. They had a lot of march speed, just getting in and out of tower mode was tough. But now that Lilith has buffed the tower mode itself, Siege should be much better on the open field in terms of getting in and out of the tower mode, allowing more mobility. And with a commander like Siege, where they're all very ranged and they're more static, mobility was their biggest issue, and allowing them to enter and exit tower mode really does help fix that mobility. So Siege definitely are getting attention from Lilith in regard of buffs, and even in the next coming update, we should be seeing a Siege commander buff. We saw that they're going to be improving some of the skills with Margaret the First and Barbara, who are both Siege range commanders, and also changing how buffs work. So Barbara and Margaret should be getting a literal buff in the next update, which we've never seen. They literally changed how the whole V formation worked, and the only reason they will do that is for Siege units, and they went out of their way, which they haven't done in a very long time, to add Margaret into the Legendary Tavern, a commander that no one has really seen into coming the Legendary Tavern, but Lilith was just like, yeah, we're going to put them in there. So Lilith is really paying a lot of attention to Siege. They seem like they're trying to push it for the meta, and that's obviously good for Siege commanders and Siege units, because if Lilith is buffing commanders, which they never ever do, then we could be seeing a Siege meta incoming, especially if the next commanders after the infantry are Siege or leadership commanders. Siege could be in a really good position if they keep receiving this attention from Lilith, and if Lilith really does want to make Siege the meta, they will probably make it the meta, since they've been really trying to buff these commanders and add more ways to unlock them. They definitely have some really good potential. The next thing that Siege also have over other troops is that they've got the ranged advantage. Just when we look at their kit, they're straight up at an advantage because they don't need to take normal attack damage when they're hitting an opponent. They only take counterattack, so the opponent is not dealing any damage back to them. And the reason this is an advantage is because if you sit at a faraway distance and just keep dealing normal damage and small amounts of skill damage, you're going to win a trade. It's like attacking someone who's just standing still, and they're not even getting their normal attack turn on you, so you're just taking counterattack. It is a really good trade in pretty much every situation, and since Siege can enter and exit tower mode quicker, this range has become a complete advantage in pretty much every single way, because if you're picking at someone with a Siege commander, you're pretty much going to wipe them out of the open field while taking maybe 1/3 of your March's HP if they don't try to attack back, because you are dealing direct skill damage, you're dealing normal attack and counter attack damage, so you're at a massive advantage with Siege units compared to pretty much every other commander. And even if a commander gets close to the Siege commanders, if they're in their range mode and it's just like a one-on-one battle, Siege commanders have the advantage of their active skills dealing double the damage when commanders are close range. So for example, Barbara at long range only does 1000 damage, but when people get close, he's dealing 2000 direct damage, and that is definitely around what you would see on meta commanders. For example, let's say Scipio Africanus, he's dealing 2000 direct damage to one target if only one target was attacking him, and obviously that's going to be strong. So the current meta is around, let's say, 2200 damage factor, and they're not too far off that if they're in a one-on-one close-up situation. So Siege commanders aren't even completely defenseless on their own, they are still somewhat able to hold their own even if they get attacked. So Siege are in a really good position in terms of having a ranged advantage as well, to allow them to get literally better trades, because they're able to deal overall more damage than any other commanders in the game due to the fact that they have that ranged advantage, and they're able to take less damage due to the fact they have the ranged advantage as well. The next thing that Siege also really have over other commanders is that they have got a ton of stats on their commanders and their talent trees. When we look at the Siege commanders, they're actually really stat heavy. Statistically, they are probably up there with some of the strongest commanders in the game. Like when we look at Margaret's kit, let's ignore her active skill because it's more of a support skill, even though it gives you 50% range normal attack. Her second skill is 60% of field relevant stats. Her third skill is another 60% of field relevant stats, especially that march speed reduction, which is really strong if you're trying to pick down an opponent that might be running away from you. She's got another amazing amount of like 30-45% of possible field relevant stats, and her expertise also gives you even more stats and even more damage. So when we're looking at Siege commanders, they are really strong in terms of stats. In terms of damage, they're also fairly strong. When you look at Barbara's kit, he's got a fair amount of active skill damage, and he's bringing even more stats, up to like another 80% of stats. It is absolutely insane the amount of damage and utility Siege commanders bring. Like a 40% defense reduction passive skill is really powerful, and that's obviously going to bring you value and your allies value in almost every situation on the open field. And since Siege already have an advantage in terms of equipment stats, they've got the ranged advantage. They can easily exit and enter their range towers more often now, and they also have the advantage of getting buffs from Lilith. We could really be seeing a very possible Siege meta due to the fact that they are just so statistically better than every other commander. And stats do matter in Rise of Kingdoms, and especially since they're also giving debuffs, it also does matter quite a bit. And this does mean Siege have a lot of potential in their skills, especially just with the current two commanders in the game. The other thing Siege have going for them though is their talents are really good. Not only do they benefit from current talent trees like the support talent tree, their actual talent tree, the engineering one, is really strong. And we'll start off by discussing the support talent tree. 18% of stats on expert design is crazy good. 18% of stats for just 3 skill points is really strong. And then when we look at the siege tree itself, there is stuff like 15% of march speed for 3 talent points, 20% counterattack for 4 talent points. This is stuff you don't see in a normal commander's talent tree. Like if we look at, let's say, the legendary archer tree, they've got decent stats, sure, but they don't get 15% march speed for 3 stats. I get 3% attack, or I get a little bit of rage gain. Yes, this is nice rage, but it's definitely not as much as 15% march speed. And yes, there's some talents in the archer tree that are good, like 9% for 3% of stats, but still, when we look at siege units, they're getting overall more stats. And even the only bad thing in the siege talent tree, that being the right side skill right here, the ebullient, I think is how you say that, the ebullient skill which allows you to deal more damage to arrow towers, you can skip that. You're not even forced to take it, and you can put the points elsewhere. So the whole entire siege tree is just really good value, especially compared to other trees. And even the stats on the way up are fairly decent value, at least giving you a minimum of 1% of stats every single time. So Siege are at a really major advantage in terms of stats, in terms of the amount of points you have to put per stat. And even when you look at other trees, they're at massive advantages with the amount of stats they're getting there, and they're able to obviously benefit from stuff that would normally be in that tree, like Rejuvenate. And you can easily justify going for something like Expert Design rather than other talents in the support tree that are not necessarily as good. But if you're a Siege player, you don't have to bother getting something like Emergency Protection. Instead, you can literally just go and get Expert Design. 18% of stats for 3 points is just insane. I can't hack it. So now when we look at Siege commanders, we can really notice that they have so many advantages. They have more stats on their equipment, more stats on their talents, more stats on their commanders than any other commanders in the game. They got debuffs. They've even got meta protection. Like when we look at Barber, he's got 10% reduced normal attack damage taken, and that's going to be really good against commanders like Lao Che, who are smite damage, and they're going to be affected by normal attack instead of skill damage. So when we look at commanders like Siege, they're able to really perform powerful in the open field in a statistical point of view. But what disadvantages do they really have? And the first one is definitely related to their relevancy in equipment. Not necessarily because of the price and the amount of stats it's giving, but because of how new the equipment is and how rapidly we're going to see the equipment meta change. Because when we look at the current equipment meta, we're looking at a massive shift coming very soon, where all the equipment is going to need to be stashed and hoarded to upgrade your current equipment. No one's really willing to go out of their way to make a new siege set, and it's really not a good investment right now. Making a full siege set of equipment while they're about to add more upgrades to current equipment is going to be a bad idea. You want to be able to at least prepare your current open field marches before you go and get more marches. So siege equipment is already at that major disadvantage, that it's too new and most players don't currently have access to it to actually benefit from it. So Siege at a disadvantage in terms of equipment right there, not necessarily due to the amount that they cost, since it costs the same as other troops beside a little bit more gold, more due to the fact that it's going to be really difficult to currently, in this current meta, justify actually getting any siege equipment. The next issue with siege commanders is that they're missing a lot of other stats which some commanders would have had. So for example, there is no direct civilization that buffs siege units. The only one that comes close is like the Ottoman Empire, which gives 10% of stats to every troop type. So it's not even a direct buff to siege. There's no special siege unit. It's all just pretty much pick the best civilization that's going to benefit a mixture of troops. So really it's just the Ottoman civilization. And in the long run, that's really not going to be really good, especially since when we look at civilizations, they can improve trades, especially the Ottoman one for archers, by like 2,000-3,000 7 and siege units won't get to benefit from that. And then also, they don't really have a good city skin. They have one city skin that came out. I don't even know when. I don't remember how you got it. I don't personally have it. And most players probably won't have it either. So, Siege are lacking a good city skin. This is only some attack. They're lacking a strong civilization. And they're also countered by every single troop type. How could we forget it? The main reason Siege didn't work on the open field is that when we look at them, they're countered by literally cavs, infantry, and archers. You can see the arrow pointing inwards means that they are countered by other troop types, which is obviously not good for the open field. Like when we see cavalry, they pretty much always beat archers. And when we see archers, they pretty much always beat infantry. And infantry almost always beat cavalry. So you would expect that the cavalry, infantries, and archers should almost always beat siege. And that would supposedly be the case, since siege were made to be farming and city taking down troops. but we found out that swarming down cities to kill their watchtowers didn't do much. So what happened is they were really, really decimated on the open field, and it's really difficult to bring back their power if they're going to be countered by every other troop, and that's probably their biggest disadvantage. The fact that if they get attacked by more than one march, they're going to get decimated really quickly due to the fact that all the other troops really are able to counter them. And the reason this is insane is because they get increased ore damage and also take reduction in ore damage from siege units. So siege really are at a massive disadvantage in terms of those regards. They're missing a civilization, and they're also countered by every other troop type, and they don't really have a city skin, and those are definitely two really big disadvantages. The other one I would also like to point out is that we don't really have real field testing results for siege. No one in the game currently has proper siege marches. If you have some, I'd be interested to see them, but I don't really see anyone running full double expertise Margaret the First and Barbara who are able to really showcase how strong these commanders are, because either they're really, really underleveled, or they don't have the right equipment, or they don't have the right skills, and in those situations you can't even see how strong a commander is. So we don't truly know how correctly powerful Margaret and Barbara is, because the only real testing, Chisco did some Ark of Osiris testing, and yes, that's going to help us. But since we've seen more buffs to them, we've seen how their basically open fielding thing would change in terms of how quick they come in and out of their tower, they could be more strong or even weaker than they were before with all the new commanders. So we need to see real open field testing, and it's too risky of an investment for most players to even consider doing it. So Margaret the First and Barbara are in a bad position in those regards, since they definitely aren't able to be as justified and as verified as some of the other commanders that are currently in the game. So now that we've looked at the advantages and disadvantages, you can really see that Siege are at the advantage in the long term here. They are getting more stats overall, they got tons of debuffs, tons of damage, and even some meta protection, and they've got really good equipment and all that stuff, but the disadvantages are obviously something that is important. So what could we really see for the meta for Siege? What does this mean for the open field? And I think what I currently am seeing is that Lilith is going to try and push these Siege commanders. I think they saw the success of ranged attack in Call of Dragons, a lot of players really liking to use it. I think they saw the success of ranged attack in the other KVKs, like Heroic Anthem Advanced, or whatever it was, and they're trying to put that in the normal game. But the thing is, I don't think we're going to really see Siege commanders on the open field. I don't even think even after they get buffed, anyone's going to really want to run them, because they are an expensive initial investment. No one wants to make that basically 2,000 gold dead investment plus all the equipment to consider running siege units who we don't even know if they would be truly strong on the field, and we don't know how they would perform. So they're really, really risky, and in terms of the field meta, I don't even know if we should even worry about Siege, because even if Lilith really buffs them, I don't know if they fit in with the playstyle of Rise of Kingdoms, because in Call of Dragons, there's a lot more versatility in how commanders are run and in which commanders fight in different ways, but inside of Rise of Kingdoms, it's pretty much just smash your troops into other troops, and I don't think that Siege are able to compete in that meta, and I don't think they're strong enough to completely shift that meta. So Siege are probably still going to be one of those backseat commanders, but if they do take the meta, we're probably going to see a lot of players try and invest in their V formation. We're going to see a lot of players get more equipment and really try to work on those Siege commanders, and it could ruin the open field meta of Rise of Kingdoms, because if everyone's just camping with Margaret and Barbaras, no one's going to want to go near enemy territory, because they're just going to get sniped down. So really, I don't think they're ever going to truly push Siege to a ridiculous level. I think they'll bring Siege up to the meta every now and again, maybe with a new commander release, maybe with even more buffs to Margaret and Barbara, but I don't think Lilith is truly going to push Siege to the point where they are meta and they're unavoidable. I think Siege will always be one of those more niche commander roles, where if you choose to use them, you're going to get decent trades, but if you're not a Siege main, you're not really focusing in them, and you're not really trying to get as powerful as you can with them, you're going to notice they aren't really going to be a very strong pairing. They're not going to do too well, especially if you are fighting with other marches. They're going to require too much focus to actually fully justify running the Siege units themselves, so we might not even see a real open field change with Siege. So now this brings me on to the next thing. Should you consider investing in Siege units? I think the short end of it is really no. Unless you're interested in the Siege commanders themselves and you see that you have the time and you have the extra resources, etc., to actually run a proper Siege march, Siege probably are not a good investment. And especially right now, since we know new equipment changes are pretty much just around the corner, getting all this new Siege equipment and getting a bunch of new Siege formations and armaments would be really, really expensive and quite difficult to acquire. So I don't think I can justify people investing in Siege right now. I can't fully recommend it, especially since we don't truly know how they're going to perform on the open field, and we don't even know what this buff could be. Like, they said they were going to buff Thutmose, and they gave him like 5% extra damage, which didn't really change much. So they may just even add 5% more march speed for all we know, and that's really an amazing improvement. So we don't truly know how Siege are going to really perform in the future, so I can't justify anyone investing in them unless you're running a farm account, where in that regard, Siege are quite strong because you can just leave them in the back and forget about them, and your farm account can pretty much get free kills. So really, for most proper open field accounts, Siege are probably not a very good investment unless you really are planning to focus in on them, which I currently don't recommend due to how steep the entry cost for them is, and until we see lower cost for Siege or even just a more calm meta and we know what the equipment changes are going to be, I can't recommend investing in Siege for literally anybody. Now, for you dedicated viewers of the channel, you would know that I own a Siege restart account, and I've been working on it on and off for around 80 days. I've been a bit busy recently, but I'm back on the grind with the Siege account, and I'm trying to make this the first ever account that's going to be a Siege main in the whole of Rise of Kingdoms. It's going to be an account fully dedicated towards Siege units, Siege commanders, Siege equipment. Everything I do on this account will be based on Siege. So if you're interested in seeing real Siege results over the next 6 or so months, you want to see how they perform in KVK 1, KVK 2, Season 3, and Season of Conquest, my channel is going to be the best one to subscribe to, since I'm probably one of the only channels out there that is crazy enough to do something as stupid as making a Siege restart account before we even know anything about them. So if you want to know how Siege will perform, or you just want to see me absolutely fail or absolutely succeed with this account, you want to subscribe. And subscribing also supports me as a creator, and it's absolutely free. So consider subscribing to the channel. It is much appreciated. To all the current subscribers, a big thank you. To all the people who just subscribed, a big thank you to you as well. Now, I just want to say thank you for watching. To see you in the next one.